Hello, amazing fourth graders. It's Mr. Torbain here for lesson 6.3. Your objective or I can statement is I can use division to generate equivalent fractions in simplest form. I don't know about you, but in this world, I like things simple. So today's lesson, you're going to be using division to make equivalent fractions in simplest form. Hopefully, you remember in a previous lesson that we multiplied to generate equivalent fractions. Let's take a look at some equivalent fractions here. We have 3/6, and an equivalent fraction is 1/2. 2/8 is equivalent to 1/4, and 10/15 is equivalent to 2/3. Now, you might have noticed things are a little bit backwards in these examples from when you would multiply to check to see if these are equivalent fractions. Well, do you notice any patterns now going from left to right? Hopefully you noticed this time that we are dividing. 3 divided by 3 gives you 1. Remember, anything you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. Anything you do to the denominator, you must do to the numerator. So we'll divide the denominator by 3 to get 2. We also divided here by 2. 2 in the numerator divided by 2 gives me 1 in the numerator of my new fraction. 8 divided by 2 gives me a new denominator of 4 in my new fraction. And finally, we divided by 5 in this bottom one. Now, fourth graders, you're probably wondering, but Mr. Torbain, why are we going backwards now? I thought you said we were making this a simple lesson. Well, it is. All of the fractions that you see here are in simplest form. That is what we are doing today. Remember, we are dividing to generate equivalent fractions in simplest form. So what is simplest form, Mr. Torbain? Simplest form is when the numerator and denominator only have a common factor of 1. So let's remember back to our factors. We have 3/5. The factors of the numerator are 1 and 3, and the factors of 5 are 1 and 5. When they have a common factor of 1, all they have in common is the 1, that is in simplest form. 5/15. Let's find out if that's in simplest form. The factors of 5 are 1 and 5, and the factors of 15 are 1 times 15 and 3 times 5. Well, 5 is a common factor, so that is not simplest form. We would need to divide further and simplify. Well, we can divide both of these by 5. 5 divided by 5 and 15 divided by 5 gives me a new fraction of 1/3. So how do you know that 1/3 is in simplest form? Well, we need to list the factors of the numerator. 1 is the only factor of 1, and 1 and 3 are the factors of 3. Since 1 is a common factor, 1/3 is simplest form. So we took 5/15 and we made it 1/3. So how do we decide if a fraction is in simplest form? Now would be a great time to take notes. List all the factors of the numerator and denominator. So how do we put a fraction in simplest form? Number 1, list all the factors of the numerator and denominator. 2, divide by the greatest common factor. Ooh, hopefully you remember that. And number 3, list the factors of the new numerator and denominator to check. Again, now would be a great time to pause the video and take notes. Let's take a look and determine if the fractions for the next 3 examples are in simplest form. If not, put them in simplest form. Step number 1 is to list all the factors of the numerator and denominator. The factors of 6 are 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. The factors of 10 are 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. Check off that first step. Step number 2 is to divide by the greatest common factor. They have a 2 in common, and that is the greatest factor. It is the greatest common factor, or GCF. Let's go ahead and divide by the greatest common factor. 6 divided by 2, anything you do to the numerator, you must do to the denominator. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we're going to divide by the greatest common factor and check that off. Now, we list the factors of the new numerator and denominator to check. And it looks good. Remember, whenever we have a common denominator, common factor of 1, that's how we know this fraction is in simplest form. So 6/10 divided by 2 equals 3/5. Let's take a look at one more example, and then I'll let you try the last one on your own. Step number 1, to find out if the fraction 8/12 is in simplest form, is to list all the factors of the numerator, 8, and the denominator, 12. The factors of 8 are 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. The factors of 12 are 1 times 12 and 2 times 6 and 3 times 4. Check off that first step. Step number 2 is to divide by the greatest common factor. Do you realize what the greatest common factor is? Is it 2? No. Is it 4? Yes. They have the factor of 4 in common, and that is greater than 2. So 4 is the greatest common factor. We need to divide 8 in the numerator by 4 and 12 down in the denominator by 4. So 8 divided by 4 gives you 2, and 12 divided by 4 gives you 3. So 2/3 is our new fraction that we think is in simplest form. But we have to check it. We need to list the factors of the new numerator and denominator and check. The greatest common factor is 1, so that's how we know it's in simplest form. Go ahead and try this last example on your own. I really hope you paused the video. Let's see how you did. 6/15 in simplest form, you need to divide by 3 and get 2/5. That is your equivalent fraction in simplest form. Let's take a look at one more example in your GoMath book that's going to help you when you practice and complete your quick check. Before we get started with our example problem, let's take a moment to show you what taking notes like a pro looks like. Pros have their I can statement written at the top of their math notebook. They have plenty of room for notes as they're following along and pausing the video. Notice I have some notes that work for me. I'm taking notes on what I see my teacher tell me. I'm pausing the video to write important steps down to help me remember that in my brain. I'm even showing examples of whenever I make mistakes and I have evidence that I have learned from that mistake. We're also going to be using the handout that is provided to you. So let's take a look at an example. We have 20 hundredths. We need to write the fraction in simplest form. We're going to take a look at problem number 9. Well, we need to simplify or write it in simplest form. Step number 1 is to list all the factors of a numerator and denominator. If you need more space, there's plenty of room in your math notebook. So I'm going to take a look at number 9. I have 20 hundredths. The factors of 20 are 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. The factors of 100 are 1 times 100, 2 times 50, 4 times 25, and 5 times 20. Let's next divide by the greatest common factor. Well, taking a look right here, I have 1 as a common factor, 2 as a common factor, 4 as a common factor, 5 as a common factor, and also 20 as a common factor. 20 is the number with the greatest value, so that's going to be my greatest common factor. Let's divide by our greatest common factor. We have 20 hundredths divided by 20 in the numerator and divided by 20 in the denominator. 20 divided by 20 is equal to 1. 100 divided by 20, let's use some of the division tricks we learned in chapter 4. After 4, let me let you in on a little secret. When you see the sticky note, that means I made a mistake and had to redo it. 100 divided by 20 is 5. Divide by the greatest common factor. We have done that. Finally, we need to list the factors of the new numerator and denominator to check. So, the factors of 1 are just 1. The factors of 5 are 1 and 5. Circle your greatest common factor. And if they equal 1, if our greatest common factor is 1, we know that we did this correctly. So, let me come back. When we write the fraction in simplest form, 20 hundredths, the fraction is 1/5. Remember, today you were writing fractions in simplest form.